Hello and welcome to episode 270 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, where Brian and I live, while everyone's crazy for the Canadian Football League. Something unprecedented happened, though. Thanks to climate change last weekend, wildfire smoke canceled the game after fans waited for 6 hours in the smoke. They ran out of concessions, which is too bad since their smoked sausages could have been even extra smoked.
Researchers have found that diesel generators are allowed to emit 48 times more nitrogen oxides than gas boilers producing the same amount of energy. Turns out double standards are not just for humans.
There is a quadrant of Canada's third largest city that has a hard time getting home insurance. Increasing hail events are shattering the cladding on homes in Canada's oil capital. But no one there could figure out what is causing this so-called climate change.
Reno, Nevada now has the world's largest grid storage battery made from old EV car batteries. At least we think it's the biggest. Las Vegas may have a bigger one, but since what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, we'll just never know.
All that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show. Oh, we got lots for you this week, Brian. I've got all kinds of personal items to talk about. Full pack show here in the middle of summer. How are you doing?
I'm good, yeah. And it seems like we always talk about the weather. It's a lot of stuff is weather related. I don't like to talk about the weather, but here we are doing it again.
Well, you know, the thing was, smoke came in again last night. There was a warning before I went to bed, and it was only like 12, 13 degrees out. So, I mean, but it gets kind of warm in the house, so you'd have to use air conditioning because of the damn smoke at that temperature, which is an energy use that seems stupid, but because of climate change and the dryness of the forest, the low humidity, the extra heat and winds, this is what's happening.
And I've kind of given up. I know you like to have your windows open in the house because you love fresh air. I've given up for two reasons, because number one, I'm lazy. We actually have a lot of windows in our house. We have a lot of outdoor, it's a large bungalow. And so if you count all the windows in the main floor and in the basement, it takes forever to go around opening them all or closing them all. So that's the first thing. I've just given up in that sense, and we just leave the air circulation, you know, the heat recovery ventilator or the air conditioning on. But then, of course, the other reason is you never know when the smoke's going to come. They do have some forecasts for smoke. They're, you know, semi-accurate, but yeah, I've more or less given up, and my windows are pretty much closed all summer now.
So this morning I was watching on YouTube a travel vlogger that I've watched a few videos of. He's kind of an American guy who goes around and talks to a local and really tries to get into different places, including communities that are struggling. Well, he went to Pacific Palisades this week. I forget his name, but I'm posting the video on the Patreon page. It's there publicly for everyone to see if you're interested. It's over an hour. But I was struck by how 6 months in, you know, the Palisades wildfires, it's still nasty business there. Like if your window broke, all the bad embers and smoke got in and wrecked your home.
Yeah.
Like all it took, it didn't have to burn. They're writing those things off. And some people did not have insurance because the insurance was going up so high that they couldn't afford it. Keep in mind, some of these people inherited those homes from their parents, you know, in the 50s and 60s, and they're not all, you know, multi-millionaires. Some of them are just regular people who lived there and could not afford the insurance premiums due to what's happening with climate change. And it struck me how careful they were. Like everything, if they're, you know, moving soot with a backhoe or something, there's somebody there with a fire hose to spray down the dust.
Wow.
I don't think they did that in Fort McMurray. I can't see them doing that, you know, because the Fort McMurray was a new city that burned very quickly during the Fort McMurray wildfire a few years ago, and they rebuilt it very quickly. Well, they're not rebuilding the Palisades very quickly. They're careful. There's so many environmental standards in California. Sometimes you read them on products just for California, even if you're here in Canada, because they have different standards there. And, you know, the trucks have sealed blankets on them when they're taking debris away. There's asbestos. There's all kinds of bad things there.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like that for a long time. And you can see a haze over the whole area because of the dust that's getting kicked up from the mitigation that's going on right now. So it's just a horrible situation there. And I really feel for them because so many people aren't coming back. Their lots are for sale, and that's that.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens. So we've been talking about the UK quite a bit because I was over there, and sure enough, they now have some water restrictions coming into effect in certain counties in England because it just continues to be hot and dry. They're just not getting the rain they normally get. So Bloomberg is telling us that several English counties, including Oxfordshire, Berkshire, and Gloucestershire, are going to have restrictions. They'll not be allowed to water their gardens, clean their cars, or fill up their pools starting a week from now. So not super desperate if they're only starting it a week from now. But yeah, these things are tough. And, we often have to water our lawns here or they turn brown. But this year, not so much. It's been enough rain and, not that many hot days.
All right, Brian, I'm very tired today. Ask me why.
James, why are you so tired today?
Another disaster from my son. You know how he's always phoning me with car incidents and,
Sure.
broken down on bridges and narrow mountain passes? Well, I changed his ringtone because it set off a bad visceral feeling in me. Now I got to change it again sometimes he'd phone me and he'd joke that something was wrong. And last night again, something was wrong. Well, I thought, what's wrong? Because you don't have a car.
Yeah.
Well, he's trying to buy a car and they let him take a Mazda 3 home and he hit a BMW next to him.
No.
You just smacked your head. Yeah, so that's how my night went. And I'm very tired.
That's why we shouldn't own cars. There's just too many complications and terrible things. It's weird.
I'm trying to help him. And, he's got a good credit rating. He's very smart that he built up a good credit rating. He bought a lot of things on credit cards just to build up a credit rating and paid them off.
Yeah.
And it worked because he checked his credit rating and it's doing very well for a guy who, he's had good paying summer jobs, but really not employed all the time. He's a student.
Yeah.
So that's worked out well. So now he can buy a car. And now he's looking at buying a new car, or an almost new car, actually, which is kind of strange because he does have a year of school left. And then he thinks he'll just settle into a job that's going to pay well. And he's pretty confident about that because he could go back to this place where he's interning at. Anyway, it turns out the BMW had hail damage and it wasn't a pristine car. But before we knew that, I was telling him, well, see if you can buff out the BMW because it's in his parking garage at his condo. And I was doing immoral things, Brian. I was coming up with bad decisions to help him because I didn't know what the consequences would be. But it turns out upon research and reflection, and by the way, most of it buffed out. Most of it, not quite all of it. So he did leave a note on the car. And most of it buffed out on his car they let him take home, which is a 2-year-old Mazda 3. And he's thinking, I love the acceleration and the handling, but it's too long and it's too, hard to maneuver in his parking garage, and it's low clearance. He's like, this is for Vancouver on the coast, not a lot of snow.
Plus, it's been in an accident.
It's been in an accident now. He doesn't want to buy it. He literally said that. I don't want to buy it. It's got a scratch on it. But they pay. He learned that they pay $80 to let him in insurance to let him take it overnight because this is the second time they've done that.
Okay,
and. It's just he goes to these car dealerships and he doesn't have a car. So he's walking and taking the bus and they're just treating him like garbage, like all the tricks they do and the pressure, just the minute he walks in the door, and he's getting used to it. The ice is broken and he's just, fending them off. But there's people trying to get him to sign things and he initialed one thing instead of signing it to get out of it. And all these tactics. And it brings to mind how the delight of how you would buy a Tesla. You could go online and order it. And in some cases, in your case, you got one delivered to you. In other cases, you picked one up. But there's no hassle. Like, you say what you want about the whole culture of the person who's running it. It was a very nice experience. And I wish more companies would do that. I think Rivian does, but they're a smaller EV maker than Tesla. And the mainstream companies are the mainstream companies. They do what they do.
Yeah. And everything's just smoother and easier when you do it online. Like, you think about ordering food, like you're just ordering takeout food from a restaurant and then having to do it over the phone, and the person has to write it down and you have to explain what you want. And, I will pay more just to order online to avoid that uncomfortable interaction with a human.
But everyone always tells me, buy a car that's 2 years old off a lease. It's already done most of its depreciating. But, it's kind of hard to buy a car like that because the warranty is going to end. He's going to have these big monthly payments of $300, which he can handle. But can he handle repair costs on top of that?
Yeah.
And there's like a new car, I think the Versa, one of the Versas has a low lease rate.
Yeah.
So he could get it for like $285 a month. This is in America. You guys have a lot lower prices than we do here. Yeah. And of course, it's worse for some of our other listeners in Europe and Australia and New Zealand. But he's got a pretty good rate that he could do that and not have to worry about it. So, it's kind of crazy to buy a new car for a teenager, but I'm actually finding that I'm less worried about him if he does that because it's going to have the latest safety features and it's going to have a warranty that's going to cover him at least until he does get on his feet, which could be as little as a year from now,
Yeah. Ideally, you want a warranty when you have a car because so many things can go wrong with them.
So speaking of him, I'm going to go see him at the beginning of August for 2 weeks. I got 2 weekends with him, one a long weekend, one a regular weekend, and some travel time, about 2 days or so each way, maybe 3 days each way. We'll see. And so it's planning it in an EV with not great range. Again, I've already made this trip, going to take a different route this time. But Brian, I've been going through my EV apps, and there's a lot of them because I don't have a Tesla.
Yeah.
Because you charge exclusively on the Tesla network. It's easy for you. I've got all these different apps for different companies, like the different gas stations, the different charging companies, the different, brands like that. And I have to have them all because I might need them. I might be stuck and I might need to go someplace and charge. So they have to be ready to go. Well, every one of them kicked me out and I had to relog in. And every one of them needed an update. And I didn't know that. So, I went through this process like 2 months ago. So it's such a pain in the butt to have to do this. And I have to make sure that my payment is on all of them so that everything goes smooth. Because when you do pull up when you're on a trip, you don't want to add any more time to the time that's already going to take you, especially for me, which I charge very slowly. You're comfortable and you have the Tesla network. But I also have the Tesla option this time, which is good. Because I have an adapter.
And you only take like 1 or 2 road trips a year. So, of course, you haven't used the apps in months and months. Yeah. And I think that's probably the case for most people. You're only going to use all of these apps a couple of times a year.
But it is a big pain in the butt, and it has to change. Like the Petro-Canada app, which is a large charging network, fast charging network in Canada, one of the faster ones. If you have a vehicle that can take it, that's not a Tesla, you probably want to use that network. They're restructuring where they're putting their stations. They're putting in new things that are flow compatible, including in northern Saskatoon, which is nice because they don't have a lot of chargers up in our sister city up there. But, that app is no more. So you got to figure out what app do I use? Use the Flow app for that, which is great. Flow's my favorite network. And BC Hydro uses Flow. But it's crazy how all that is working. Now, we have reported that there is a movement in the United States which will affect Canada as well, but not necessarily other places in the world. You'll have to do your own thing where they're going to have kind of like a one communication like we would use for Interact in North America for our bank cards.
Yeah.
One bank card will work at all banks through this Interact network, and there's an extra fee or whatever, a small fee. But that has to happen. And also plug and charge has to happen where you plug it in and knows your vehicle. And Chevy's been a bit dickish about that. Also, I'm changing the tires on my Chevy Bolt after only 2 years because this is not true for all EVs, but that EV comes with fuel-efficient tires that don't last. Yeah. I had that breakdown in November on the way up to Saskatoon, which was hell. It took hours. Yeah. And my bladder didn't take a vacation. I sat on the side of the road like an idiot. And then I also had a bulge in the tire, which my wife noticed because she uses it for work, and we fixed it fortunately in time. And this is a common thing for these tires, to not last very long and to puncture easily and to have, because they're so fuel efficient. So I was looking at Costco, but then I did find the tire that I happened to get replaced when I had that puncture on the highway. I took whatever tire I could, and it happened to be the best one. It's the best one for the car because the problem with EV tires is if you replace them, they may cut 10, 15, some people say 20% range, which is no good. These tires offer durability and better traction. By the way, these tires that came with the car, terrible in snow. Absolutely the worst snow car we've ever had. It was perilous driving in snow. These tires will be better. Tires are expensive, but we're getting them, and I will have peace of mind on the highway that they won't, because otherwise I will not enjoy myself. I mean, it's one thing to go to Saskatoon, 2.5 hours away. It's another thing to go through a mountain pass that's a 2-lane highway and break down and wonder where the next tow truck will be, and then lose your hotel that you've paid for. So, yeah, that's a nightmare that I'm not going to happen. Speaking of nightmares, I, the other day, decided to check the solar power on my solar panels on my app. And guess what, Brian? I don't do that very often anymore. Do you? And we used to do it all the time when we first had our panels.
Yeah, not so much anymore.
Well, I was kind of wondering, I was going to use it to see if I should turn on my pool pump, if it was bright enough to turn on my pool pump to heat the pool. I was going to, it's two different things. There's electricity. There was nothing there, Brian. Nothing. My panels were not functioning.
Wow.
And zero, and they weren't for 14 days. And I didn't know that because I don't check my app. So half of the best month of the year, I had no power. And so, of course, this is how I shot myself. I was in the morning and I redid the inverter, which is a long process. You have to turn off in a certain sequence. And I cross-checked 2 different YouTube videos on how to do it. They told me when they installed it, they said, be careful, you have to do it in this order. And I couldn't remember, and I didn't write it down.
Yeah? Oh, no.
I should have. So I cross-checked 2 YouTube videos, which weren't exactly the same setup as me, but it was kind of the same for the same brand, and did a 5-minute startup process, which was expected, and it worked. Have you ever had to restart your inverter?
No, I've never had this problem.
Well, these are all these stupid power bumps that we're getting in North Regina here.
Yeah,
these ridiculous little dips of power has finally done in my inverter that it needed to reset itself, and it's getting kind of frustrating.
Okay, on to Reno, Nevada. This is from Canary Media. This is the first, or I guess the largest, installation of used EV car batteries into a grid storage battery. Now, this is a thing we've talked about many times. This is one of the great benefits of the clean energy revolution, is that once your battery is used up in your car, it can then be used for secondary storage. But we just haven't seen a lot of this actually deployed in the real world for many different reasons, one of which being electric cars are still pretty new, so there isn't necessarily the supply of old used car batteries. But, this is so far the biggest in the world. This is Reno, Nevada. This is on the campus of Redwood Materials, which is a battery recycling firm that we've talked about before. J.B. Straubel is the founder, and their goal is to recycle the materials into batteries. And this is sort of a kind of a side project. It's not their primary function. Their primary function is to rip apart the batteries and get the minerals and stuff out of them. So, they did this to power a data center that happens to kind of share some land with them. So this is 63 megawatt hours, and their goal is to have 7 days of power available for this data center, even if there's inclement weather and they're not getting sunshine. They're also got solar on this, and they're using solar that is mounted just flat on the ground, which we've also talked about before.
Really?
This is the hot new thing. Earthos is a solar company that does these ground-mounted solar systems, so they're just flat on the ground. And of course, it's going to depend on your climate and, where you're situated and everything. But, you save a lot of money that way. Like, hardware for mounting solar panels can be quite expensive, so you put them on the ground. And then they're also easy to clean. So there's these little robots constantly go around cleaning these solar panels that are flat on the ground. But the goal of this is to just provide power for this data center. It's not a huge data center. They only have, what does it say here? It's a sort of a gigawatt of power. Yeah, something like that. But so it's not a huge data center, but 63 megawatt hours of battery storage. The business case for battery recycling is still not fully proven. It's still very early days in these kinds of businesses. Redwood still seems to be doing okay. They have enough funding to keep going for a while, but I don't think they're really making any money yet. There's another company, Li-Cycle, in the U.S. that declared bankruptcy recently, another battery recycling company. But it only took them 5 months to put this together. it's, they sort of did it in the kind of quickest and cheapest way they could think of. They didn't go with a lot of expensive mounting cases for these things. Like, they didn't bother to put up storage containers or anything. They just tried to keep it as simple as possible. But, these are battery packs out of many different cars. And, I imagine that's the biggest challenge, is just trying to figure out how to hook all these things up in series when each one of them is going to be, slightly different because it's from a slightly different car.
The voltage will be a little bit different on different packs. Sometimes they're greatly different from 400 and, say, a Chevy Bolt like mine, and 800 and some of the faster charging Hyundais and so forth. But I guess they know what they're doing. I don't. I'm not an electrician. I'm not an electrical engineer, but there are ways of doing it. And there's been examples of this in Europe and Japan, but small-scale stuff that hasn't really taken off because, like you say, there's not a lot of EV batteries out there. My car, my Leaf, one of the first ones out there, still using it, thank you.
But Redwood Materials, since this is what they're doing, is collecting old batteries. If anyone's going to get enough batteries, it's likely going to be them. So it's 792 individual EV battery packs. So essentially,
they're getting
from
these,
700.
They're getting these packs to recycle, but they're saying, hey, let's not recycle them just yet. Let's put them, because this one has a certain amount of power. Let's put this in storage, and it'll be more cost-effective to do that. That's interesting. They are, I guess, the perfect people to do that. Maybe they should build up some data centers around their facility, or maybe other recyclers can do that.
Yeah, and presumably they can add to this as, like these batteries, typically they're going to be below 80% of their original capacity, and they're going to continue to lose that. But of course, it's less taxing. Using it in a car is more taxing on it. This is a kind of a slower charge and discharge. So, they should be able to use these for many, many years before they decline even more. But then, of course, you can just add more batteries into the system.
That's right. And really, I don't know what the cutoff is. Maybe it's 20%, maybe it's 40%. But I mean, why not just leave it there? Why, even if it's just a little bit?
Well, there's probably, there's a cost. Like if one of the batteries is down to 20% capacity, there'd be a cost to removing that and taking it out of the system. So maybe it's probably still worth it to leave that, crappy old battery there.
Well, what I love about, this operation is that they use the energy that's already in the batteries for heating the elements, for extracting the different components. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
Right. Yeah. You talked about that a while ago. Yeah.
That's very cool. So now I have an update on the Clean Energy Show Air Quality Project. Listeners to our show have donated generously so that I could have an air quality monitor here at our location in the city where I live. And Brian, Friday night, football's big in our town. Do you watch football anymore? You at one time you did, right?
Oh, yeah. I watch it occasionally. I don't pay super close attention. But...
Well, it's a freaking culture thing here. It's 1,000,002 people or 1,000,001, and if you don't have a jersey for the provincial Canadian Football League team, you're just not part of the community. You're an outsider. And of course, everybody leaves the province, and they're still fans. I grew up with it. I had season tickets for $20 once and got a free LP. I've talked about that on the show before. Yep. That kicked off me. And then one day I was at the Grey Cup in Edmonton and my left buttocks was frozen. And I decided halfway through the second quarter, this is ridiculous. This is just entertainment. This is not anything spiritual or meaningful or deep. And I fell off the fan bandwagon and I no longer give a crap. But everyone else here does. You go to cemeteries, you'll see Saskatchewan Rough Rider flags on headstones. Like, this is what they cared about? Okay. This is the meaning to their life? Not me. It can't be. It can't be. Put a little solar panel on my gravestone. So the game was postponed due to wildfire smoke. But it was a crap show, Brian Stockton. It was bad because it took 5 hours for them to cancel it. The game time was 5 o'clock. So the radio went on the show an hour before that, and 7 hours later, they signed off. Boy, they were tap dancing and interviewing anyone who would speak.
Yeah.
Because I tuned in a couple of times.
Well, the part I don't understand is since they were fairly easily able to schedule it for the next day, and so they did have the game the next day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
It wasn't easy. They had no hotel rooms, remember? This is because there's a country music festival going on outside our city, and all the hotel rooms were booked. and they could not get hotel rooms for their entire organization. The professional football team's quite a few people.
Got it.
They put 40 people at the hotel they were staying at, which is our nicest hotel, the Hotel Saskatchewan, I think. And the rest of them were 4 to a room in the University of Regina dorm.
Right.
But they did not want to postpone it. This is rarely happening in the history of the league.
But I guess what my point is this is going to have to become normal.
Yes.
Like they're going to have to start planning for this.
Last year it almost happened, right? Or it was delayed an hour. It was delayed an hour earlier this season. And they looked at the smoke forecast and it was, going to clean up, and they were right. Yeah. This time the smoke forecast didn't work out. They saw that it was coming, and that ended up being hopeful and pushing it to 10:45 at night was when they called it. And even then, if they didn't call it, it would have started at 11:15 after a half hour of warm-ups. 11:15 at night. And, the fans had been there for 5 hours. They had been there for 5.5 hours, maybe 6. So it was a weird my daughter worked at the game, by the way. She works in the box, luxury seats, serving people to raise money for trips the high school people do sometimes. So she was there, and I was getting texts from her. She said people were getting antsy. They were not happy. Yeah. The air quality was 10. And I looked at the CFL regulations, and it has to be 7 or below in order to play. So our air quality index goes from 1 to 10 plus. And we've complained about that before on the show, and the forecast was for 10 plus. And that's very unhealthy. Now, the Clean Energy Show Air Monitor was showing 245 air quality index in the States. That's very bad. It's been worse, but you wouldn't want to play a football game in that.
So this is the AQI standard, which is different. It goes up to several hundred, I guess?
No, it goes up to 400.
Okay.
And we exceeded it when the day that the Clean Energy Show received our award recognition and we went out for a photo op, it was exceeding.
Oh, right, yeah.
It was hideous. So, even if you're a fan, you're not exerting yourself.
Yeah.
But you're sitting there for 6 hours in the smoke, breathing it, and that's not good either. Yeah, so the fans stayed waiting. The TV broadcast stayed on the air for an hour or two. I don't know. They were trying to pretend that they had analysis that hadn't been said before, and they were repeating themselves. They finally signed off. Maybe 2/3 of the fans had left by 11 p.m., and those who remained weren't happy when they learned it was all over. The air is dangerous, though, that they were breathing. This is respirologist Samir Gupta.
These are tiny, tiny particles, and the challenge is that they're small enough that you can breathe them right into your lungs, and they go deep into your lungs, and the tiniest particles, called nanoparticles, actually get into the bloodstream from the lungs, and they can affect many other organs, particularly the heart. So anytime you have these kinds of wildfires, studies show that we see more patients in the emergency room showing up with things like chest pain.
So that's what you're breathing for 6 hours, and you can't get a beer because they ran out of everything.
Yeah.
They ran out of hot dogs. They ran out of everything. In fact, they couldn't get food in for the next day when it was rescheduled for 2 p.m. They had to say you can bring your own snacks, which they don't normally let you do. So that was an odd experience, and not a lot of people showed up for that. Yeah, it was a test for our fans the next day. My daughter recorded this when they announced the game was canceled. People were not happy who were there. There was this vibe that maybe it's just smoke. Why can't we play? What's going on? Yeah, so there wasn't a riot.
But yeah, fans were upset because they've been waiting there for hours, and a lot of them didn't seem to think it was a big deal to play in smoke, but of course it is.
Okay, this is what TSN said, the broadcast TV.
Hinted. For the Calgary Stampeders, the story was much different because of Country Music Festival Craven here. Almost all of the hotels in the city are completely sold out. And so for the Calgary Stampeders, only 30 of them could stay at the Hotel Sask, which is where they were the night before. The rest, including defensive coordinator Baron Miles, had to go stay at the University of Regina in the dorm rooms, 4 to a unit, sharing a bathroom. But Baron Miles told me, you know what, it was kind of fun. It takes you back to your college days, but definitely a roller coaster for a lot of the players, guys.
So my daughter said that the radio broadcast was still on the air because they were playing it in the box seats.
Right.
And I tuned in to see if I should go pick her up or not and to see if it was going to be canceled. And by then, they were just squirrely. Like they They were crazy.
Now, if Suits leaves, let's run over there. Look, Suits is gone.
Suits is leaving too.
This game isn't playing.
Yeah.
We're done, guys. Everybody go home.
Yeah, so the TV broadcaster, like color commentator, decided to leave. They got word before anyone else that the game was canceled. But it pisses me off. We talked about this on our bonus podcast that 6 Republican lawmakers from Minnesota and Wisconsin wrote a letter to Canada's ambassador complaining that wildfire smoke from Canada is spoiling summer activities for their constituents. Well, spoiling my activities. But of course, they had great ideas. It wasn't climate change doing this. It was something else. Yeah, well, boo-hoo. They blamed poor forest management and arson, which is not true.
Yeah.
Calling for better action. You guys do something. Stop this arson and rake your forests. Stupid idiot Republicans. Scientists, however, attribute worsening wildfire seasons largely to climate change, with Canada warming twice as fast as the global average. Republicans in the United States have passed or supported laws that hinder climate action by promoting fossil fuels, blocking federal emissions regulations, and opposing renewable energy mandates. Climate change isn't real to them, but arson somehow is. It's a fiction, it's bullcrap, and I'm pissed off at it.
It sounds like double standards, which is my segue to the next story that we've got here from The Guardian. And there's a new study that looked at the emissions from different sectors. And I think we all kind of knew various parts of this, but the study kind of put everything together that depending on what type of machine you have and what sector it's in, it can be allowed to pollute a lot more. So air pollution controls in some sectors are much weaker than others, the researchers have found. They looked at legal requirements for nitrogen oxides. These come from engine exhausts, flues, and chimneys and include health-harming nitrogen dioxide. This is a pollutant that many UK cities struggle to control, this report from the UK. By calculating pollution per unit of energy, the researchers were able to compare the different types of engines, turbines, and boilers from handheld leaf blowers to cars, ships, aircraft, and power stations. The lead of the study said, "We expected that large emitters such as power stations would have stricter limits than smaller appliances like a gas boiler you have in your home, but this wasn't the case. Per unit of energy produced, power stations can emit 10 times more nitrogen oxides than the gas boiler in your home, and a digger working on your road could emit 100 times more. Shipping, aviation, and construction and agriculture were among those that had the loosest legal controls on the air pollution, and this was just owing to lax regulations and not the actual technology. For example, a diesel ship engine could emit legally 5 times more nitrogen oxides than the same engine if it was used in a generator, which doesn't exactly seem fair. A medium-sized diesel generator on a construction site is allowed to emit 48 times more nitrogen oxides than a fossil gas boiler used to heat a home, even though they're producing the same amount of energy. So we've talked about this in different ways. You know, gas-powered leaf blowers are particularly bad. But the idea being that all of these regulations grew up over many, many decades in different sectors. And it might be time to start, looking at all of these things and figuring out some of these discrepancies, because it just doesn't make sense that the same engine in a different device can be allowed to pollute more.
So Toronto, largest city in Canada, in Ontario, it had the second worst air pollution the other day in the world of major cities. Now, the cities that have the worst air pollution, like those in India, tend to have them in November, December, sort of the late fall for us, and because of agricultural burning after the summer harvest and so forth. But often those cities talk about construction. Well, this now I realize, because I often wonder, well, what's so messy about construction? Yeah, you're manufacturing cement, you're creating some sawdust, but all that adds to the particulate matter. And now I realize that, construction sites have diesel generators on diesel equipment and things that may not be controlled at all. And they're just spewing this crap into the air so much that it is causing that kind of problems.
Yeah, and we've gotten quite good over the years, decades of air pollution requirements for cars. So, cars are huge polluters, but they've been regulated and, the pollution has been tamped down so much from, as recently as the 70s and 80s. Cars emit way less pollution. But in the meantime, everyone's kind of forgotten about all of these other sectors.
And we've talked a lot about gas-powered lawnmowers and gas-powered leaf blowers here in North America. Some cities are banning them, and people are complaining and fighting back and saying, we can't use electric. Well, you can. And, you know, we talked last week about being behind diesel vehicles on the road. That's happened to me again this week. I hate it.
Yep.
And I hate smelling my neighbor's, gas lawnmower because there's no emission controls, and now I'm breathing it, and I don't want to.
No, I'm getting better at it. It's like if I spot a car, oh, there's a car up there that looks like it's from the 1970s, then I hit the recirculate the air button on the car.
I'm doing the same thing.
And yeah.
It's hilarious that we're both doing the same thing, but that's where we are. Some of these diesel vehicles, the gas cars aren't as bad as the diesel vehicles. The diesel vehicles emit stuff that we know is very, very bad. And if the pollution control on them is broken or gone from an older vehicle, it's just terrible. Let's talk about insurance and climate change. I was alluding to it at Pacific Palisades earlier. Well, that's happened not only in California, but a lot of places in the world that are affected by climate change. And Brian, this comes from my sister-in-law. I didn't know this happened. I was quite shocked when I heard this from my sister-in-law, that part of the city that she lives in, Calgary, Alberta, which is the corporate oil capital of Canada. It's got a lot of head offices there, a lot of big growth in that city. It's now Canada's third largest city, never used to be. And it's kind of divided into quadrants. She's in the northwest, but the northeast has been hit by hail a lot. It's not that huge of a city on world standards, but for some reason, that quadrant of the city keeps getting hit. And I've mentioned before in the show many times about how the insurance industry there, it's gotten so bad. It never used to be like this, by the way. Now it is. And, my brother-in-law's camper's getting pounded by hail all the time. This is a problem. But what the insurance industry is actually doing is setting up 5 planes to seed the clouds, to turn it into smaller hail or rain instead of allowing it to keep getting turbulently rotated up in the atmosphere and pushed up, and it gets frozen like a ball of ice, comes down, gets bigger. As that process repeats, if they seed the clouds, they can get that stuff out. That's how desperate they are. And this was a couple of years ago we talked about this on the show.
Yeah. And it's not totally clear how well that works, like how much you can control the weather by doing that. But they're desperate.
Yeah, because if you have a vinyl siding clad home, it's a lot of money to replace all the vinyl siding. Because I've seen it even here in our city. We had one hail event in part of our city, and you can see the whole home's just destroyed, it's pummeled. And you couldn't get a siding guy. Like, I need a siding guy for my house because of a windstorm in January, which never used to happen like that. Yeah. And it's just, they're booked up for years. And of course, vinyl siding, by the way, is made from Alberta oil and gas, that fossil fuels they put out of the ground. And ironically, they're telling people not to use those, which is a rare move for them to tell people not to use something made from fossil fuels. They'll make you eat toast from fossil fuels if they had a chance. So it's a serious problem that's hitting the homes for many in Calgary, especially in the Northeast, where a lot of people are poor. This is not the richest part of the city. It's not a slum by any means, but it is, a lot of newcomers there, a lot of people who are not able to handle high home insurance, and they're not even offering high home insurance in some cases. Hail, not just the occasional summer hailstorm, but a pattern of increasingly severe and frequent hail events are wreaking havoc on people's homes and their lives. Northeast Calgary has become ground zero for some of Canada's worst hailstorms. And now I've had relatives out there all my life. This never used to be that way. This is changing climate. And it's so stark to me right here at home to see what's going on. We've even talked about how insurance companies deploy those planes. Well, they're still going up. They must be working, Brian, if they're still going up. And they had a hail event, I guess, this past weekend that destroyed a lot of things again. I've seen a lot of people post about them. Yeah, you can see the looping little radar paths on them. In 2020, a single storm caused over $1.3 billion in damage, making it one of the most expensive natural disasters in Canadian history. A hailstorm.
Yeah.
Not a tornado, not a ice storm, it's crazy. The storm shredded siding, broke windows, and left entire neighborhoods looking like a war zone. And now, 3 years later, after a huge hail event 3 years ago, many residents still can't get proper insurance coverage, depending on your postal code. Some companies have pulled out entirely from insuring homes in certain postal codes, and others are still offering coverage, but only with enormous deductibles, sky-high premiums, or excluding hail altogether, which is crazy. I mean, Florida, you sometimes have increasing insurance problems depending on where you live. Tornado Alley, sometimes even. California, during the wildfires, the interface between the urban and the wildland is increasing and become very dangerous. This was and continues to be a concern for Californians due to their wildfire risks, increasing due to climate change. It's all so obvious, Brian. So what does this mean for homeowners? It means they're vulnerable. If another storm hits, and it will, they might be left paying for all the damage themselves. And remember, this is part of Calgary where many families are lower to middle income. They don't have $20,000 or $30,000 lying around to replace a roof or reside a house. Some people are trying to hail-proof their homes with better shingles, hail-resistant siding, even impact-resistant windows, which is something they talked about in the Palisades video. Was, an object would fly through the window. Yeah. And now some people are putting hurricane-proof windows in California just for the fire protection, which I found quite fascinating. But these upgrades, they're expensive and they don't guarantee that you'll get insurance coverage. Some insurers won't even consider that kind of investment. You make the investment, they won't consider it, That's kind of a pisser. It's a climate change justice issue. The people who can least afford to deal with climate change are the ones feeling the pain first and worst. And our insurance systems were built around predictable risk, but now, thanks to climate change, those patterns are breaking down. Unless insurers and governments step in to share the risk, we're going to see more people left behind. And, it's in the news. I watched the newscast the other day. It was almost all climate change.
Yeah.
They weren't pro-climate change. It just happened to be climate change story after climate change story. And even if they weren't saying it, you knew it was climate change. So it's not a Calgary issue. It's a warning for everyone. As extreme weather becomes more common, more communities are going to be pushed into crisis. And we can do things about it. We have the solutions. Listen to our podcast. It's all there. Fix it.
Yes. And the thing that I keep hearing in this news coverage, because we've had many, many recent extreme weather events, flooding events down in the U.S., they tend to phrase these things as a once in 100 years storm. And they're now starting to realize, the language around this has to change because these are no longer 1 in 100 year storms.
Occasionally once in 1,000, it's just crazy.
Yeah. Unpredictable, so I'm not sure what number you come up with, but are these now once in a 10-year storm? In some places, that's what it's looking like. All right, so if you want to contact us, you can send us an email, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, or you can get to us on SpeakPipe, speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. You can record a message and leave it there. And you can also join our Patreon, and as a paying member, you get access to exclusive bonus episodes once a month, and sometimes bonus content on the website, and there's sometimes content on the website that is for everybody as well. So please join the Patreon and support the show. Coming up, it's the lightning round.
It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
A Dutch startup wants to make charging an e-bike easy and wireless. This is from Electric. At the heart of a new system is a clever combo, a charging kickstand.
Yeah.
Your kickstand is your charger. You flip it down onto the ground and it makes contact with a charging pad, which could be embedded on a sidewalk for public use. It could be at your home. You just flick down this kickstand that can be charged on put on any bike and adapt it to any e-bike, and then it's easy peasy.
This is great. There. I love this. I love anything that is a new standard because we talk about this all the time for cars. The standard that cars use for charging is super important. And, they decided on a standard years ago in Europe and then only more recently here in North America. Now we have a standard for that. But for bikes, it's not a thing we talk about. So I'm not sure if this would become the thing that is standard, but certainly it could become one of them in terms of wireless charging. But even for regular charging of bikes, I'd love to see some kind of a universal standard.
That's true. And I think it'll work itself out eventually, but there doesn't seem to be any urgency for people to do that. Fire has destroyed buildings at Grand Canyon National Park, place that I've been to and care about. The historic Grand Canyon Lodge, the only lodging on the Grand Canyon's North Rim, along with the visitor center, the gas station, a wastewater terminal treatment plant, and an administrative building and some employee housing has been destroyed. 2 wildfires are burning at or near the North Rim, known as the White Sage Fire and the Bravo Dragon Fire. My daughter, when she was little, was there, and she became an honorary junior ranger.
Nice.
Which put her 742 in line for presidency of the United States, I believe.
Sure.
In case the world fell apart. So she's an official title. In a first, solar was the biggest source of power in Europe last month. Bigger than nuclear, bigger than gas, diesel.
Sure.
Bigger than any other sort of generation. Coal, all that. Solar was number one. Analysts say the abundance of solar power helped keep the grid stable during a powerful heat wave, which you were a part of, Brian Stockton, when you went to visit the UK.
Because when there's a powerful heat wave, what do you want to do? You want to turn on the air conditioning, but thankfully, if it's sunny out, then you have some power to help with that.
It's time for a CES Fast Fact. Between 2000 and 2019, an average of 83,000 Western Europeans lost their lives every year as a result of extreme heat. And that's an average. Wow.
Yeah.
Per year.
Are extreme numbers that I assume are getting worse.
And 20,000 in North America, where everyone decides they need an air conditioner if the heat gets above room temperature 2 degrees. Like you.
Yeah.
You've just given up on the world. You've just closed the windows and sealed yourself up. And that's from the Financial Times. Waymo is preparing to launch in Philadelphia, New York. I get the sense that they're trying to some urgency there with their expansion. Or maybe they're just ready to do it. But does the Tesla thing actually affect them? I don't know. Bloomberg, Oklo Inc. has selected a contractor to build its first nuclear power plant in Oregon, a sign the energy startup is gaining momentum in its efforts to deliver a new type of reactor. It has agreed to the lead constructor for a small reactor that they plan to install at an Idaho National Laboratory. They expect to submit an application for designs to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is probably run by a monkey now, by the end of this year, and the Idaho plant may be complete by late 2027. Yeah, they said that on Bloomberg TV. We'll see. Tesla has launched in India finally, Brian. The prices are said to be a bit high, though, but they've been trying to get into India for a long time, so we'll see how that goes. Another CES Fast Fact for you. In the United States, it costs $3 per watt to build rooftop solar. You know, they price it per watt of your system, how many watts it can produce at a peak time. Mine is 3.3 thousand watts. So it's $3 to build rooftop solar in the United States, but only $1 in Australia. They made it dead simple down there to put solar panels on your roof and eliminated much of the bureaucracy that adds soft costs. And in America, it can take months to get a permit to put solar on your roof, same in Canada. In Australia, you go on an app and you have your permit within 24 hours. It's easy peasy, and that's the way it has to be. They don't have to spend money, the solar companies, marketing and having a salesperson come around. That's eliminated. You go on an app and it's there. And China is doing that with EV chargers at condos and apartment buildings. Every city in North America should be doing this. Michael Thomas says, in America, we let utilities make it complicated and slow to connect your panels to the grid. In Australia, they simplified the internet connection process. From Clean Technica, Texas Governor Greg Abbott is on record as saying, ever since I've been governor, we've had weather events that were completely unpredictable, and that is just part of nature.
Sure.
He pocketed $1.1 million in campaign cash from fossil fuel interests during the last election and has never said the word climate change, ever. And at any time in his political career, his mouth will not say those words. They just will not. They cannot. So far as anyone knows, Guyana installs 4.8 megawatts of home solar systems. Guyana's a solar photovoltaic home energy systems project has added a whopping 4.8 megawatts of installed capacity across 10 regions since its inception in just 2 years ago, July 2023. We have a link to that. China is planning a massive dam project in the longest and deepest canyon in the world, a remote gorge in East Tibet, and we talked about it before in the show, and we reported that the project has alarmed ecologists and neighboring India, which fears China will weaponize the river water. It depends on, like, release it if they get mad and flood the hell out of people.
Yes, water ownership is a tricky issue.
Drones cleaning solar panels continuously in Xinjiang solar farms without damaging the surfaces. These are drones that kind of remind me of the ones that do office building windows now.
Yeah.
They have a high power and a little hose attached to them. Well, they're cleaning them constantly. This is a nonstop process. And, you know, solar farms on deserts, which is the best place to put them because you're not really using usable land, the desert gets dusty, right? It's the best place to put them, but it gets dusty. And this continuous cleaning of these drones increases the panel efficiency by 5 to 20%, which is incredible. And this is a huge solar farm, so it's 100 megawatt hours per day increase by having these drones. So it's very economical in this situation to do that. Not all places do they get dirty and lose efficiency, but, you know, wind in a desert blows dust quite easily. So was quite remarkable to me. And finally, this week, a drop in air pollution drove a surge in warming, a study finds. This is a theme on the show here. Ships changed the way their pollution came out, and it let more sun through. But this is different. This says scientists have noticed that the planet has been heating up faster than expected in recent years. They've been trying to figure out why, and now a new study might have found the answer. Get this. The recent spike in global temperatures may be linked to cleaner air, specifically cleaner air in China. Over the last 15 years, China has taken major steps to cut down on air pollution from its power plants and factories. They do this for political stability as well as other reasons. They don't want the people to revolt, and people are very unhappy about having to choke on big city air. They've especially targeted a pollutant called sulfur dioxide. It's nasty stuff. It causes breathing problems and contributes to smog, but it also reacts with other chemicals in the air to form tiny particles called sulfates. And those particles actually reflect sunlight away from Earth, creating a cooling effect. So here's the twist. When China reduced its sulfur pollution, it also reduced the cooling shield that these sulfates were providing. That in turn allowed more heat to reach Earth's surface, which may have sped up global warming. The new study published in Nature Communications, Earth and Environment says the massive drop, about 75% in sulfates, in East Asia could explain a lot of temperature rise since we've seen on the planet since 2010. One of the lead researchers even described it as unmasking the true level of climate change. In other words, now that the air is cleaner, we're seeing the full impact of greenhouse gases without that cooling mask. So ironically, cleaning up the air may have made global warming look worse in the short term, but it's a necessary step, perhaps in the long term. The question is, how do we move forward knowing this? Well, we have some of the answers here in the show, Brian.
Yes, and if you want to contact us, we're at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Around social media, Clean Energy Pod, and you can look for us on Patreon, patreon.com/cleanenergypod. And there's also a merch store where we have a few nice items of merch.
Thank you to all our Patreon Clean Club executive members, Green Bastard Brent Rowley, and everyone else who supports us on Patreon. Thank you for supporting climate positive content, and we'll see you again in 7 days.
See you next week.